Ego needs honors in order to be validated. Confidence, on the other hand, is able to wait and focus on the task at hand regardless of external recognition. This is a quote from the book Ego is the Enemy. The book makes the argument that our ego is holding us back from achieving our ambitions and reaching our goals. It's a book about building our mindset so we don't make the same mistakes as those who became too proud and ended up ruining themselves, like the story of Icarus who flew too close to the sun, or Steve Jobs who nearly ruined his career, or Howard Hughes, the millionaire who did ruin his career, or John DeLorean, the guy who designed the iconic car from Back to the Future, but then ended up getting involved in cocaine. So we'll summarize each section of the book and then we'll go into ways to manage our ego. So the book reminds us that in any given point we're either aspiring for something, we've achieved success, or we've failed, and these come in cycles that often repeat. The book is based on Stoicism. It's broken into 3 parts. Part 1, aspire. Part 2, success. And part 3, failure. Briefly, before we get into the first part, one of the humbling reminders that this book gives us is that most of our success isn't our own. And now the example that the book provides is the example of Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal from the Los Angeles Lakers. So they were very successful players. They won 3 consecutive championships together on the Los Angeles Lakers. But what ended up happening was that they started talking badly about each other in interviews and in the media. And then Kobe refused to sign again with the Lakers until Shaquille O'Neal, or Shaq, was traded to another team. So the Lakers agreed to trade Shaq, and what ended up happening was that the Lakers didn't win another championship for 7 years, right? Had they been humble and stuck together and trusted each other, they already won 3 consecutive championship finals. Part 1, aspire. Holiday tells us that whatever we're doing, our worst enemy lives inside of us. It's our ego. He defines it as an unhealthy belief in our own importance, arrogance, self-centered ambition, and he argues that the only thing that keeps ego around is comfort. We're comfortable when people respect us or when they praise us, when they're interested in us. Some people stay in unhealthy, toxic relationships because they feel important or needed. And when we remove ego, what we're left with is what is real. And Holiday encourages us to distance ourselves from our own perspectives, to kind of observe ourselves from an external viewpoint. He argues that these days, raw talent, skill, or even confidence aren't rare. But what's really rare is humility, diligence, and self-awareness. He tells us to think big, but act and live small. It'll make us focus on action and education without caring about status, which will lead to us constantly moving forward. And another rarity is silence. Because especially in our culture, we're encouraged to share our opinion, give everybody's opinion a platform and a voice, no matter how ridiculous that opinion is. But silence is rare. Silence, the ability to resist contributing to a conversation just to get validation. Holiday argues that confident and strong people don't need to feel and sound important. Talking is draining. Talking and actually doing something are competing for the same resources. So it's either you have one or the other. Research shows that visualization is important, but at some point we begin to confuse visualization with actual progress. And he argues the same is true for verbalization. In other words, work and chatter eliminate one another. He makes the point that if our purpose is larger than ourselves, then everything becomes easier and harder. Easier because we know our goal, and everything else washes away because they're just distractions. And you won't need recognition. It's harder because you'll have strict guidelines to measure whether your opportunities help you with your goals or whether you're just being selfish. That it's not who you want to be in life, it's what you want to accomplish. He gives the example of the mixed martial artist Frank Shamrock, and Shamrock basically gives us the concept of the plus, minus, and equal. Each fighter, to become great, should have someone who's stronger than them so that they can learn from them, someone who's equal to them so that they can challenge themselves and grow, and someone who's not as strong so that they can teach that person. And this accomplishes a lot. It purges the ego from thinking that we're so great, it reduces the fear of not being able to succeed, and gets rid of the laziness that makes us just want to coast through life. And Shamrock argues that false ideas destroy us. Martial arts to him is about humility, placing ourselves beneath someone who's greater than us, beneath someone we trust. Holiday gives us a definition for a true student. A student is like a sponge to him, who absorbs information, who's self-critical and self-motivated, always challenging himself so that he can move on to the next topic. A real student can be their own teacher and critic, which leaves no room for the ego. And then he goes into how he doesn't like the word passion, the idea of passion, as this kind of unquenchable thirst for something vague that you want to accomplish, an ambitious, distant goal. It seems harmless, but it's actually masking a weakness. It's breathless and impetuous, but it's a poor substitute for actual discipline. For mastery and for strength, you need to have purpose. And we need realism, because realism is detachment and perspective. He says that for real critical work, We need purpose and not passion. We need deliberation and consideration and not passion and naivete. Passion emphasizes form and not function, but purpose is function, function, function. He argues that if we want to achieve something big, we'll be subject to all sorts of treatment, and pride will blunt the instrument that we need to succeed, our mind. And when you feel pride, the question to ask yourself is, what am I missing? What am I avoiding or running from with my franticness and my embellishments? You can be proud and you can also be silent. Pride doesn't need to be loud and obnoxious. And how to implement this into your life? Holiday tells us to remind ourselves that we're passing the marshmallow test. We're delaying our gratification. We're earning what our ambition is burning for. We're making an investment in ourself and not in our ego. Give ourselves just a little credit, not too much. We have to go back to the grind and continue working and working. And to do this, pick a topic that you don't know about and read about it. Sit in a room where you're the least knowledgeable person, because that will subject you to an uncomfortable feeling, a defensive feeling where your deeply held assumptions will be challenged. Part 2 is called success. A lot of times when success arrives, we become complacent and we lose the fire in our belly, and our minds become weak and we lose what allowed us to succeed in the first place. He cautions us against writing our own narrative, because the thing is, if you're writing a story, you can write it however you choose. You can embellish the details, exaggerate the accomplishments, play down the doubts and the weaknesses. He cautions against the obsession with the idea of, I knew it all along, I knew that I was going to succeed. It lets us mislead ourselves if we write our own narrative. They can't change the past, but they have the power to negatively impact our future. Instead of focusing on living some great, awesome story, the epic ballad of the psych student, we have to focus on the execution to continue working on what got us here in the first place. It's not about beating the other guy. It's about becoming the best version of yourself. It's not about having more than the others. It's about not succumbing to the things that draw you away from your ambitions. Success is also dangerous. Success comes with some very dangerous delusions: entitlement, control, and paranoia. And in order to counter this, we need to have sobriety, especially if things keep getting better and better. So now part 3 is failure. Failure always comes uninvited, but because of our ego, many of us allow it to stick around a lot longer than it needs to. And the solution, Holiday says, is to become less attached to the actual outcome. Fulfilling our own standards is what fills us with pride and self-respect. We have to value the effort and the actions rather than the results, regardless of whether the results are good or bad. So it's this idea of do your work, do it well, and then let go and let God. Recognition and rewards are extra. He cautions us against wants, because if we continue wanting, then it will lead us to disappointment. It will set us up for resentment or worse. And if success slips from our fingers, then we have to realize that we're going back to the aspiration phase. According to Robert Greene, there are 2 types of time: alive time and dead time. Dead time when people are passive and they're just waiting, and alive time when they're actually busy and productive, utilizing every second. The only real failure is abandoning our principles. And he says, killing what you love because you can't part from it is selfish and stupid. If your reputation can't absorb a few blows, then it wasn't worth anything in the first place. Aspiration leads to success and adversity. Success creates its own adversity and hopefully new ambitions. And adversity leads to more aspiration and success. It's an endless loop. Here are some tips to manage your ego. Tip number 1, always be a student. And he quotes, "It is impossible for a man to learn that which he thinks he already knows." To think that you already comprehend a subject, you're not going to invest your time and energy into it, and you won't learn it. Even if you don't actually know that concept, you can delude yourself into thinking you do. Holiday tells us to be a perpetual student, always learning no matter where we are in life. But it's actually helpful to look down the chain and help and mentor others, and looking up the chain will allow us to realize that there are various levels and degrees of excellence, basically, and an accomplishment. That way we can restrain our ego. Again, it's a concept of the plus, minus, and the equal from Shamrock. Learn from everyone and everything, from the people you beat, from the people who beat you, from the people you dislike, even from your supposed enemies. No matter what the lesson is, we can't stop ourselves from hearing it again. Tip number 2 is to swallow our pride. Pride is a really dangerous feature of our ego because it can magnify our successes. It can make minor failures seem monumental and grand, and small successes huge accomplishments. These exaggerations don't allow us to achieve real success or greater success. We trick our eyes into thinking that we've already achieved success, and we no longer need to strive for more. He states that all of our positive attributes that we need for success are dulled by pride. So for example, our ability to form relationships, our ability to learn and adapt are harmed by pride. A humble person is always improving. A prideful person is not. Tip number 3 is to find the perfect balance. Aristotle described virtue and excellence as points on a spectrum. The center of the spectrum is optimum. It's the best. Holiday uses this point to basically tell us to find that balance. Where is that optimal point on that spectrum? If we move towards the extremes, we only find risks. But it's easy to do that. It's easy to become complacent. It's easy to focus on ourselves rather than the bigger picture, how we're impacting the world, our lives, other people, to examine our impact on the world and the people around us and the things around us. Tip number 4 is to detach ourselves from the outcome. And the example he provides is of John Kennedy Toole. So he was an author whose books were universally rejected, unsuccessful, and then he ultimately committed suicide. But after his death, his mother still publicized his books. And after his death, his book won the Pulitzer Prize. We need to separate ourselves from our outcome. Whether our work has value or not, we shouldn't base our personal worth on it. All we have the right to is our efforts. We don't have the rights to the fruits of our efforts. Profound point, because sometimes all we think about are the fruits of our labor. I work so hard, I'm entitled, I deserve this, I should get this. Tip number 5 is Katabasis. We need to fall in order to learn. If you know anything about Greek stories, there's often a low point. Katabasis translates as going down, right? In Greek mythology, there are often the stories of characters reaching a very low point and then emerging, becoming stronger after that. There's a heightened awareness, motivation, and knowledge. Katabasis forces us to face our reality and grow as individuals. It's the hero's journey. Use your low points to reflect and to come back stronger. And tip number 6 is to maintain our own scorecard. It's like to have our own internal barometer or measure of success, our own principles. To distance ourselves from the expectations of the external world. You know, the external world might tell us that we need certain things to be successful, or a certain route is the only route that can take us to success. But if we're concerned only about our internal motivation and our own barometer, then we won't crave the spotlight and we won't be obsessed with it. So that concludes the summary of Ego is the Enemy. Hope you guys enjoyed, and thanks so much for the support. Please leave a like if you did enjoy, and I'll see you guys in the next one.